Dr. Orion of the YouTube channel PsycHacks says that men sacrificing for women or for higher ideals is brainwashing. Let's go.
Most men that exist on this planet are brainwashed. I understand that word has some very serious connotations, but try as I might, I haven't been able to find a word that better describes men's predicament. It's a brainwashing that is supported in a million little ways across most cultures, and it's been going on for so long that its existence has been completely naturalized. Joel would voluntarily surrender that goal, despite the protoplasmic desire of every cell in his body to continue living, without the presence of some overarching ideology. Patriotism, love, freedom, the right thing to do is a bridge too far. And of course, it's easier for us Westerners to consider the kamikaze indoctrination to be brainwashing because we don't share those cultural beliefs. It seems foreign and alien to us, but it probably wouldn't have to the Japanese at the time. And that in turn implies the existence of beliefs that seem perfectly reasonable to us that might be baffling and incomprehensible to those who do not share those beliefs. However, as we'll see, the more things change, the more things stay the same. In point of fact, men today are still raised to imitate the divine wind. This is the belief under which most men are brainwashed, that men are most useful as sacrifices.
In this portion of the clip, he says that there must be some type of indoctrination that's occurred in order to allow men to try to sacrifice themselves for a higher ideal. What he doesn't understand is that brainwashing or that indoctrination, that teaching we're not blank slates, bro. He's taken blank slate ideology. That means that it is completely the way that you're nurtured or brought up into these ideologies that has provided that deep abiding nature in men to sacrifice of themselves for the benefit of others. And my question solely to him is, if not for those higher ideals of things like patriotism, sacrifice for religious reasons, or giving of yourself for family, for friends, for community. If not for those ideals, what exactly is Dr. Terabon willing to give and sacrifice of himself to accomplish? Because if it's just for the protection of his ability to remain in his own sheltered life or anyone's sheltered life and to no longer shoot for what's good and right in society, then there is no reason to give of yourself. And then culture and society collapses in on itself, because without the sacrifices of men, when you try to drive over the river that's on your way to work, there would be no bridge, there would be no electricity when you turn on there. And those are just seeking the higher ideals of the progress of humanity. All of those things come at the backs and the hands and the blood and sweat of men who have come before him. And the reason why he can even have a YouTube channel and have all this technology is because some man sacrificed, believing that it wasn't just for himself, but for the higher ideals of the progress of humanity. And that's not even the deepest and richest reason to sacrifice. The deepest and richest reason to sacrifice is because we are pointing our life and our goals and our society toward the exact model of who we as men, real Christian men, are chasing after. And that is the ideal of Christ himself, who said, just as he did, that we should be self-sacrificial in order to accomplish what is best and right, true and beautiful.
Far more men commit suicide than women do. From a very young age, men are groomed for self-sacrifice in a way that women, who are instead instructed in their inherent value, just aren't. And a society in which one gender is systematically programmed to sacrifice for the good of the other, in my opinion, can't possibly be just and can't possibly be equal.
In this instance, when Dr. Terabon brings up the suicidality difference between men and women, he is correct in that men have been undervalued, and their sacrifices, truthfully, are undervalued because the inherent worth of men does often come with what they can accomplish and what they can do in pursuit of a goal, because what makes you a man apart from what it is that you can accomplish? If I were stuck in a chronic illness and that made it that I could no longer do anything for my friends or family, of course I would still have value as a person. But perhaps the reason why men have so much higher self-deletion rate than women do is because they have been so stomped on by society and so much undervalued in what, and really we've taken a lot of the self-sacrificial ideal out of the lives of men, telling them they can no longer have pursuit of a woman without being a creep. They can no longer have children because it's bad for the planet. They can no longer have religiosity because that is somehow oppressive. When you take away these ideals, that is in fact reducing the purpose and meaning in the lives of men, and that could be part of the reason why so many of them are listless, hopeless, and self-deleting.
And that they're incurring harm, physical or emotional, is one of the most heinous transgressions that could occur in society. That they had a right to their lives, and that they weren't bound to do the right thing when the right thing conflicted with the right thing for them.
I cannot imagine how sad it must be to only be able to do the right thing when it is the right thing specifically for me. How could I even find a valuable life when all I am doing is what's exactly right for me? Now, one of the things that might be the logical conclusion or the logical endpoint of this ideology is the right thing to do for myself is to have a country that is able to stand up patriotically, or a people group, or a group, an in-group, like a religious ideology, that I want to thrive and succeed because that would be what's right for me. And therefore that sacrifice is actually, in the long run, what's good and right for me, because what's right for me is to have children who can be raised in a society that is stable, that is without criminality, that is just. Those things come at the sacrifice of men. And so the logical endpoint of this is that the kamikaze pilots in World War II perhaps believed that they were doing what was right for them, but it just happened to align with what was right for their nation in their belief system at that time.
Men are being sent to war to die for causes that they may not understand and for reasons from which they cannot possibly benefit. In this country, men are forced to enroll in selective service. A lot of American women don't even know that this program exists, but it doesn't seem to bother anyone, men or women. Why? Because we all just kind of believe that, yeah, men are the disposable sex. They're expendable. Like, I wonder how many fewer wars we would collectively have fought throughout history if the belligerents were forced to send women, that is the valued sex, into battle.
Terabon says that he cannot imagine what the world would look like if we sent equal gender equality into battles. And I've been reading the book Return of the Strong Gods by Orion, which has to do with patriotism and land and country and people groups, and the reasons why those have been stomped on by the open society since World War II. Reno has this to say about this precise ideology. We now live in a culture that is allergic to the very idea of obligation. The strong gods of old, truth, faith, and patriotism, have been exiled in favor of openness and liberation. And Terabon is taking this open society to its logical conclusion, which is everything must be equal across all genders, even the obligations and sacrifices that men make that make them have value and meaning to themselves. So what is right and good for me is actually to sacrifice for others, because my life would be empty without it. And that is not a indoctrination. It is in fact genetic, it's biological, it is what is ingrained in us. And you cannot give me a Jungian solution to why that's persisted over time. It is biological, and that is hardwired into us, not just by training or indoctrination, but by who we are as men. Sacrifice yourself to the right things, and you will have a meaningful and purposeful life. Do not discount the strong gods of old: truth, faith, patriotism.
It has to do with giving up on his hopes, his dreams, his interests, his friends, his happiness, and the possibility of happiness, if and when any of these things conflict with his duty to his woman. They are told to grow up, man up, and step up, not when action would be in their own self-interest, but when action would be beneficial to the interests of a woman with whom he is in a relationship. In fact, as I argue in my book, romantic relationships are probably the largest wealth redistribution program that has ever existed in the history of this planet.
Terabon says that relationships are the greatest wealth redistribution plan that has ever existed. And what he's asking for, essentially, if we take that to its next logical step, is that everything would be equal. Again, he just wants equality across the sexes. And that is essentially what's been persistent in our modern ideology, and it is not going well for men. When everything is completely ecumenical across all fields of income, distribution, generating wealth, when a woman can earn more than a man, they devalue that man, and therefore, this is the result. You won, bro. You won. So there is no reason why this ideology that he's trying to push forward, that men should only act in their own self-interest, there is no reason why, there's no evidence that that is going to work, because that's essentially where we are living right now. Now, 1 Corinthians 16:13 says, "Be watchful, stand firm in faith, act like men, be strong." Does that sound like a low calling or a way that a man would be discounted and undervalued? It doesn't to me.
There is a not insignificant subset of men that has so deeply identified with this programming that it has been elevated to the status of an ideal. Sacrifice in the service of women, an ideal that is ingrained in the romantic imagination, is not just a duty for these men, it's a source of pride.
This programming has been elevated to the status of an ideal because it's precisely what was written in the Bible as the ideal that men are supposed to pursue, and it has worked for billions of people across thousands of years, and this gentleman has been the benefactor of those sacrifices. So yes, it's been programmed, but perhaps by the God and creator of those exact men that this gentleman, Dr. Terabon, is speaking to.
Stockholm Syndrome. They have not been able to escape this captive ideology, so they have imbued it with positive, even holy, i.e. divine wind, attributes. Not only that, but for every man who believes that his self-sacrifice in the service of women is a source of pride, there is another man who is currently despairing because he has no woman to whom to offer his life as sacrifice.
I think it's interesting that Dr. Terabon frames this only to the advantage of women, because what happens, and this is my question to him, what happens when children come into the mix? Because am I not supposed to sacrifice myself unto their well-being? So it's not just that the woman, yes, she is a vehicle and, a highly valued, loving, gracious relationship vehicle to the utmost sacrificial relationship that a man would ever have, which is that to his children. Now, do you want me just to act in my own self-interest, even though I have 4 kids? Is that going to be good for society? Is that even going to be good for me? What about things like guilt, shame, and regret? Do you think that that's all just programming that has come about because I was raised in a household where I was programmed that I was supposed to sacrifice for kids? Absolutely not. And if that is in fact programming, it's called parenting, and that's happened with literally every person that's ever existed. And so the programming is actually what has allowed our human species to persist. And if that for some reason is antithetical to what it means to be a good man, then I guess buy the ticket, take the ride, and sign me up.
With sweat and blood. Otherwise, how much do I truly value my values? However, if I'm going to do that, if I'm going to go all in, I'm going to do so in the service of my dreams and my values and my ideals, not for somebody else's. I reserve that right to myself. Another person's distress is not necessarily my responsibility.
Again, the selfishness of this ideology is coming into full bloom. He says he wouldn't do anything out of act for anyone's dreams other than his, and that someone else's distress is not necessarily his responsibility. But if you want to live in a cooperative society where you have higher ideals and a culture that is actually pointed towards something meaningful, then when someone else, for instance, what just happened in Texas with the floods and everything, their distress might actually be something that if I can respond to it and fulfill my calling as a man who can self-sacrifice to go rebuild a community or go even attempt to rescue someone, is that not the cooperative spirit that leads to a society that's worth living in? Dr. Terabon, respectfully, I fundamentally disagree with your premise. And if you want a selfish, self-immolating society of men that are just acting in their own self-interest, then you would have almost identical to the society that we actually live in now. And my premise is that because the self-deletion rate, the depression rate, the anxiety rate, the rate of substance use is all higher now, we've tried this ideology and it is not working. Thank you to PsycHacks for the content today. And thank you for anyone who's watching and listening. Please do not undertake this ultimate open society worldview that says that everything to yourself, nothing to the strong gods of old, patriotism, faith, community. Those are the things that have pressed the ball forward for mankind. Let's not discount their value, and do not tell me that that is not acting within my own self-interest, because I don't want my children to grow up in a society and a community where they cannot thrive. And that might be self-sacrificing of me, but to each their own, I suppose. I'll just go on with trying to use my life, my will, my strength for the benefit of others. And that, to me, is what's best for me, Dr. Terabon. Thank you.